What is up, you guys, and welcome back. Thank you for joining me here today for another episode. I am excited to have you here. Before we get started, I have a few announcements. The first announcement is that this is going to be the last episode of this season. I did this last year, and it was really healthy for me to take a little break in the summer. Summers tend to get really crazy for me. I'm not sure if they do for you too. I will be back in September. Secondly, I did this episode and then it sparked in me a self-care package. So I am working on that. It should be wrapped up and finalized in about a week. So if you're listening to this real time, then the following Tuesday, May 3rd, will be when that self-care package launches. This self-care package is really exciting for me. There are a lot of different things that I poured into it. Things that I've found along the way, a lot of PDFs and then a couple of meditations. So the PDFs include 78 ideas for self-care, 8 things that everyone needs to thrive, how to parent yourself, pillars of self-care, cultivating a daily rhythm, cultivating a nighttime routine. And then I throw in, if you're interested in it, I don't know if you are or not, a budget spreadsheet that is really helpful in terms of getting your finances in order, because financial stress is a huge contributor to overall stress, and getting your finances in order is one of the best things that you can do for your own mental health. That's why I put that in there. On top of that, there's a gratitude meditation, a shadow work meditation. So if you are interested in that, that is launching on May 3rd. If you are not following me on Instagram, that is the best place to get updates, news, all that stuff, because that's my primary platform. But if you don't have an Instagram, or you're not on Instagram, or you're not interested in following me, I will leave the landing page for that self-care package in the link below. So if you're a little early, it's just going to be a default landing page. But then as I get it all in order and launched, then you will be able to access and purchase a self-care package from there. It will be $37 if that is what you're interested in. I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so today we are talking all about self-care. In this episode, we talk about why self-care, why it's super important, what it is, what it's not, certain helpful phrases, certain non-helpful phrases that we tend to use. Then I kind of categorize self-care into 4 different areas, which is parenting yourself, doing, receiving, and creating. This is just the way my brain organizes everything. And so either agree with me or don't. This is just my take on self-care. I thought it was necessary to have a little bit of a conversation around self-care because I think it's really either misunderstood or it's misguided, it's misdirected. We're doing things that we say are self-care and are actually adding to more stress in our life. And the point of self-care is to reduce that stress, bring our baseline back down to an easier, controllable level so that we can handle the things in our lives that we need to. And the way to do that is through self-care. So agree with me, disagree with me, whatever you want, take it, leave it. It's just my take on it. Either way, though, my hope is that you will take something from this episode and apply it to your life. So if you've been with me all of first season and second season, thank you so much for being here with me. And I will see you in September. Welcome to the Get Out of Your Head podcast, where we talk all about the stories that keep you stuck, blocked from manifesting what you really want, and away from your authentic life. I am your host, Sarah, from Spirit, Mind, Body. Hello everyone, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. If you are returning, thank you for joining me today. If you are new, today we're talking all about self-care. I'm excited for this episode. I think that self-care is such an underestimated tool and it's very misunderstood, I think, as well. So I'm excited to give you my take in how I see self-care, and I want you to walk away from this episode asking yourself, how do I get the most bang for my buck when it comes to self-care? Because the truth is that most of us are stretched too thin, we're overworked, we're underpaid, we don't have enough sleep, we have way too many responsibilities, and we don't have a lot of time for self-care. So the question is, what do I do that fills my cup the most? I think self-care, having a self-care practice is imperative to healing any kind of any kind of wound or any kind of past thing, it's very, very important to make sure that you are both on your path and make sure that you're set up to heal, most definitely. So this episode came out of a conversation that I was having with my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law this last weekend. We were talking about the concept of self-care and self-love. And the thing that we kept coming back to was that we really weren't taught this. We weren't taught growing up. And even into our adult life, that is not culturally normal to talk about our deepest needs, knowing what we want and need and asking for it. If anything, we get the message that that's kind of selfish. It's selfish to have needs. I know, even especially, I grew up as a Christian, and asking for things that you needed, I should say I grew up as a Catholic. I think a lot of Christian traditions do this well, but the way that I grew up in the church that I grew up in was that if you had needs, that was probably a bit sinful. That was selfish. Just give of yourself, give of yourself. We think that we have this unending well of things that we can just give to other people. And the truth is that if your cup is not filled, you absolutely cannot give to somebody else. You're going to show up as the worst version of yourself. You're going to show up bitter, resentful. You're going to show up angry about it. And that's not the way that somebody wants you to show up for them either. So why self-care? Let's talk about this. Self-care is how you show yourself love. And I learned about self-care and self-love mostly through my journey with motherhood. I think that being a mother is the closest that I've ever been to unconditional love in my external world. And it's sort of weird because it's like it's easier to see these things play out with somebody else or, out in front of you versus trying to do it from within. It's sort of easier to see this. And so I've learned a lot about my self-care journey and my self-love journey through my kids and how I've treated my kids and how I talk to my kids and how I want to be there for my kids. And then I apply that to myself. So that's where my examples come from. Just hang with me if you're not a parent. But as a mother, I show my kids love by making them healthy food, making sure they moderate the amount of candy they eat, making sure they get into bed on time and have a good night of sleep, making sure they have clean clothes to wear. And I show my self-love by making sure I go to bed on time, making sure I have clean clothes to wear, making sure I moderate the amount of sugar I put into my body. That is called self-care. When you do this, it puts you in the space to be the best version of yourself. Last week, we talked all about stress and how stress makes us into the worst versions of ourselves. We're probably going to be operating out of programming, which is not your chosen response. It's the way that you learned to deal with stress when you were growing up. Every self-care practice is going to decrease the amount of chronic stress that you have by either removing the things that contribute to it. So that's like by saying no to a new work project or a favor for somebody that you really don't have time for, or by eating clean food. By doing those things, we remove certain chronic stress that exists, or takes our currently existing stress and moves it through your body in a healthy way. These are things like journaling, exercising, having a healing practice or breath work or anything like that. So going back to the parenting example, when my kid doesn't have enough sleep or is hungry or emotionally deprived or we haven't spent enough time together, all of a sudden she starts doing things or he starts doing things. And for context, they're 1 and 2 years old, so they're pretty little, but they start doing things that are off, acting out, pushing her brother, stop listening, being uncooperative. And that's because at some level she's carrying this stress and she's trying to operate normally while her body is telling her a totally different story. Her body is telling her there is some kind of danger out here. I'm imbalanced, I'm unregulated, and I have to, do something to make that happen. And we start acting like the worst version of ourselves in that situation. Kids need to feel good to do good, and we are no different. I'll give you an example. Have you ever had a day where you're sleep deprived, you're overwhelmed at work, you've got some personal stuff going on, and you're so stressed? And then how do you respond to the person who cuts you off in traffic? Or how do you respond to your husband when he's asking where the garlic powder is, right? Like, not nice. We don't have a lot of patience for it. But on a good day, you do have patience for all that. Your response to your husband is kind and warm. And the response to the person in traffic is also kind and warm. Self-care nourishes us to the level so that we can make sure our own needs are met so that we can show up as the best versions of ourselves. The point to all this is to think of self-care not as a luxury, but as an absolute necessity. You wouldn't think about going a week without food. You wouldn't think about going a week without sleep. Or maybe you will if that's in your life path and you're like, this is a challenge for me that I'm going to do this, and maybe somebody's studying you or whatever. I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of people who do a lot of crazy shit. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility, but all in all, if you're an operating human, you've got a normal-ish life, you go to work, you do the thing that most people do, you generally are going to eat every day. You're going to sleep every day. You're going to brush your teeth every day. You wouldn't think about going a week without food, so why would you think about going a week without self-care? Self-care is nourishment for your mental state, your spiritual state, your emotional health, and food/sleep/movement is nourishment for your physical health. And you need all of these things. And I just want to say this, physical health can also be self-care, but I think that self-care is also the type of self-care that I'm talking about mostly is the one that's going to fill you emotionally speaking or spiritually or mentally. As we get older and we become more individualistic, our needs shift and change. And so for kids, it's pretty straightforward. They need love, routine, food, good sleep, clothes, time to play and develop. For us, we're managing so many different things from work to probably a household, kids, friends, extracurriculars, all these things. And we've got to figure out what will recharge us the most when we are feeling low. What nourishes us the most? I want to talk about what self-care is not, because I think that it's also very misguided in our society. And I'm not going to sit here and lecture you about how self-care is not bath bombs, glasses of wine, or necessarily a spa day. I think that we get this. If you listen to my podcast, chances are you're already on that level. There isn't an essence of self-care that can be captured in an Instagram photo because self-care is so unique to the individual. It's unique to the timing of what you need. There's so many different things. But let's just acknowledge that. Self-care is not a catch-all luxury. It just depends on what you need in this moment in your life. On any given day, hitting the snooze button 100 times could either be a form of self-care if you're really needing the extra sleep, or it can be a form of self-neglect if you're avoiding doing or facing something. So it really just depends on what you need at the moment. Self-care is a lot of asking yourself on a moment-to-moment basis, what do I need in this moment? I think also what self-care is not is sometimes self-care can look like a justification for an addiction. There are a million things in our world that hijack our dopamine system in our brains. Everything from online shopping to mindless television to alcohol and drugs. And all of these things can really trick us into believing that we're doing self-care because we're making ourselves feel good. But the question is it nourishing you? That is the big question. Self-care should bring you more into your life, not out of it. It should connect you with your higher self, not numb you out. Self-care should enhance your mindfulness and awareness. It shouldn't disconnect you. I think that any mindless activity actually is not self-care. I think we need more mindfulness, not less. And I'm going to go ahead and argue, and this is just because I've been there, that a glass of wine to take the edge off or reality TV that makes you feel better about your life because at least you're not as fucked up as that person, or mindlessly scrolling through social media it's not a version of self-care. I'm just being honest with you. It doesn't mean that we can't do these things or we can't recognizing that it's pleasurable, or that it doesn't mean that you need to stop them altogether. If you really enjoy having a glass of wine to unplug, that's fine. I just don't think that you can honestly put these down in the category of self-care as a practice that nourishes and fills you. And this is just me talking. You need to figure out what's right for you. If you disagree, then great. I hope that you do, and you need to find your own truth in this. But I just feel like there's too much that goes on that says that self-care is mindless pleasure. And I totally disagree. I don't think that self-care is mindless pleasure. And I have engaged in mindless pleasure before, and it inevitably makes me feel like shit later. even though in the moment I'm kind of numbing out and I'm enjoying what I'm doing to an extent, right? And if you're like, actually, mindless pleasure does make me feel after, I do feel more energized, more at peace, more connected after watching reality TV or drinking a glass of wine, then that's something that you get to decide. But I think the point here is to be really honest with yourself. So all of that to say that until you have a solid self-care routine, I actually think that self-care usually is going to look unappealing to us on the surface. The things that nourish our minds and our souls and our emotions are actually going to look like the harder things to do. For instance, it's harder to choose a salad over a crispy chicken sandwich at lunch. It's harder to choose meditation over TV if you're out of practice. It's harder to choose work on your creative project over online shopping when you're feeling bored. You get what I mean? If you're out of practice, these easy dopamine fixes don't necessarily carve out a pathway in your brain that says it's worth it because it's immediately gratifying, right? And so when you do start doing things that are nourishing, it's going to be kind of hard because you need to teach yourself over and over and over again that a salad's going to make you feel more clear-headed, energized, bright, connected, and not bloated than the crispy chicken sandwich. You need to learn that meditation actually does have payouts. It's not going to be immediately recognizable by you. These things that nourish you aren't immediately and necessarily rewarding, and that's why we need to teach ourselves that it is indeed worth it. A helpful phrase here that I have found is to ask yourself, is this practice worthwhile? Asking yourself that question gives you a bigger picture of what your self-care practice is accomplishing instead of just mindless in-the-moment pleasure. Something that I want to caution you is watch out for this phrase, I deserve this. I think this is a common phrase that is often used to justify unhealthy habits as self-care. When we say I deserve this, it's said usually in the midst of struggle, a stressful time for you, and it will be around some kind of mindless pleasure activity that you know isn't in your best interest, but you justify it by saying that. I also think it has a little hint of like, fuck it, I deserve this. Screw it. I'm going to get it anyway. I'm going to get that chocolate shake. I'm going to buy that even though I know I can't afford it, or even though I know my finances are kind of getting thin this month. I'm going to do it anyway. Even though I know I don't have enough time to watch TV tonight, I'm still going to do it anyway. I'll make up for it later. I deserve this. This came out a lot for me when I was starting my workout practice, what I do for working out. This is a long time ago. I think it's well, established right now, but when I wasn't in the practice of working out and I didn't have a good habit of it, I would go to the gym for like the 8th day in a row because I was trying to do this and I was actually burnt out. And so that burnout was fueling this I deserve it, fuck it mentality where I would be like, I'm going to eat that cheesecake. I'm going to eat that Oreo because I deserve this. Really? But cheesecake, Oreos are not something that nourishes me. It gives me comfort in the moment that's being used to mitigate the burnout. Does that make sense? And so what I really needed to do was to listen to my body, maybe take it easy at the gym, take a day off, build a sustainable practice. And so, I just use that as an example, but we do this a lot when we're saying I deserve it or screw it. I'm just going to do it anyway because it's bringing me some sort of pleasure, and it's just used as justification, but it's not actually contributing to you. And probably actually it's creating more stress later. I talked about this in my last episode where it's sort of like I think I called it addiction, right? So it's like our addiction or our vice. And what really happens is like we're feeling some kind of tension or stress or something that's uncomfortable, overwhelmed, whatever that feeling is. We give into our addiction or our vice, and the justification is I deserve this. This is self-care. This is pleasurable to me. I'm taking care of myself. And really what it actually is creating is more conditions later for you to be stressed, right? You stayed up too late watching TV because you told yourself you deserve it, and now you have to go to work and you're exhausted and you really needed to get stuff done and you're not able to function at a high level because you're too tired. Or you have a financial goal this month and you were feeling really burnt out or you were feeling really overwhelmed. And so you decided to go and buy that thing anyway. And now you are looking at your finances at the end of the month saying, oh no, I've got to buckle down next month because I have created new financial stress, right? That I deserve that. That's coming from an unhealthy place, I think, is always going to lead you to like more stress later. That's why I say watch out for that phrase. Okay, we talked about what self-care is not. Let's talk about what self-care is. Self-care is a form of mental, spiritual, emotional nourishment. I said that in the beginning, but it's knowing yourself so that you can mother yourself. It's knowing what you truly need and then making the space to give that to yourself. Self-care are usually the things that you'll walk away from saying, I really didn't want to do that. I didn't have time for it. It was too hard. That was not what I wanted to do today, but I am so glad I did it, right? It's choosing that worthwhile option. That's why that word is so powerful. Is this worthwhile? Self-care should make you feel connected, loved, supported, nourished, empowered, healthy, and balanced. What other ways do you think self-care should be? Those are just some words, keywords that I thought of that I thought would really help to put that in perspective. But what's another word that resonates with you? Out of all of those, maybe you choose one. Self-care makes me feel this way. And then ask yourself every time when I'm sitting down to eat, does this food make me connected, nourished, supported, empowered, healthy, balanced? When I'm sitting down to watch TV, does that make me feel connected, loved, supported, healthy, nourished, empowered, balanced? And any other way that is worthwhile to you. I think that's a really good practice to do. Okay, so I was thinking about it the other day, and I put some categories of self-care together because I think that it's helpful to break it out. And this is kind of the way my brain works, because I think that we throw self-care all into one. And it's important to recognize that self-care, again, will make you feel balanced. That's a really good point. So what I need on any given day could be different, especially like that sleep example. Sleep can, on any given day, be a form of self-care, or it can be a form of self-neglect, depending on what you need. It just depends. And so doing self-care that is, supporting all of these different categories or picking from every single one of them is going to help you feel a bit balanced. And you got to figure out what works for you. So the categories of self-care are, and then I'm going to give you examples of each, but I'm just going to roll through them really quick, and then I'll give you examples. So the categories of self-care are: first, parenting yourself, planning, identifying what you need, identifying where you're stuck, all of those things. The second one is doing. This is proactive, actively mitigating stress so that you can move out of ego. The third one is receiving, allowing your spirit to speak. Creating the space to listen to your spirit is really what this is. And then creating, merging with your spiritual self, allowing the universe or the spirit to move through you and into the world. These are the categories of self-care that I have. So let's talk about parenting yourself. Parenting yourself is like being the observer, creating the space for what you need, making that space, being that forward thinker to look at your schedule and say, oh, that's going to be pretty tight this month, or I'm going to have to really prioritize my self-care in this way. Asking yourself on a moment-to-moment basis, is this nourishing me? Or is this making me feel connected, loved, supported, nourished, balanced, empowered, and healthy? It's the level of awareness and consistency in questioning and getting curious about what you really need. So I keep going back to the example of sleeping as self-care or self-neglect, but like say, for instance, shopping. Let's just do a different example. Shopping can be the same way. If you're the type of person that never spends money on yourself and you really need a new jacket and you gather up the courage to actually spend the extra money for the jacket that you really want rather than the one that's just on clearance, I think that is a really good, that could be self-care, right? That could be like parenting yourself. Having a drink can be the same way. If you're not really the type of person that drinks, but you've gathered with a family and your brother brought some Italian wine, and so you're sort of uptight about it, but you've decided that your underlying belief is something to the tune of self-judgment for drinking, and so usually you wouldn't dabble in this, or usually you wouldn't have a drink. In this case, if this is you, you can have a glass of wine, and that could be an incredible act of self-empowerment for you in overcoming that self-judgment. Do you get what I mean? It just depends, but having that level of awareness and consistency in questioning is really what I mean by parenting yourself. The point is that what is true for one person is not true for another. Even what was true for you yesterday may not be true for you today, and so it's giving yourself permission to change your plans when the situation calls for it, and being good observers to know when to change plans. I think that one of the most underestimated skills in life is to be a good observer. If you could adopt a skill on like a consistent basis, or, hone a skill, it would be a good observer. Observe yourself all the time. When you're standing in line and your first reaction is to pull out your phone because you don't want to wait, stop. Observe yourself. What are you feeling? Where is it in your body? There are endless things to push your attention on, and the light and bright and shiny thing is going to, it's almost a no contest. You have to make the conscious decision to not pull out your phone and to get really quiet and to be a good observer, rather than looking at the things with the lights and the things that release massive amounts of dopamine at every single finger swipe up. Okay, the second category of self-care, doing. This is, like I said, the proactive version. You're actively managing your stress. This is going to be the hard thing that you don't really want to do, but you know it's good for you. So you sort of have to force yourself sometimes to do it. And then at the end of the day, you say, I'm so glad I did that. That can look like going to the gym for you. For me, for a long time, I like going to the gym now because I'm in a habit of it. But for a long time, going to the gym was such a drag. And I would force myself to be like, I've got to go to the gym today. And I never left the gym saying, I regret going to the gym. But here's a word of caution. When you are in the habit of doing something, it can be really easy. Like this happens to me a lot, where I shouldn't work out, but I say, I've got to work out. I've got to work out. I've got to work out because this is my routine. This is my routine. And so sometimes they all mesh together, right? You got to come back to the parenting one and say, okay, am I giving myself permission to take a day off when I'm not really feeling it, or when my body is calling for rest? So here are some examples of doing self-care. This could look like setting a boundary. That's the hard thing. That is the hard thing, to have an honest conversation with somebody to say, when you talk like that, it's really toxic in my life and I don't have space for that right now. And so if you're going to talk like that, I just can't be around you. I'm sorry. That's a hard conversation to have. It can look like saying no to something that you don't really want to do, especially if you are a yes sayer. If you say yes a lot, if that's your default, yes, I can do that. Saying no is going to be a proactive thing where you prioritize yourself. I kind of already talked about working out, but cleaning your house or decluttering can be a doing thing. Meal prepping or eating clean or eating, vegetables or whatever your body is craving at the time, that can be a doing, proactive type of thing. Hanging out with friends, if you're an introvert, kind of like forcing yourself to hang out with people so that you can have those connections of people to lean on, where you can build those relationships, even though you'd rather just stay at home with your dog and curl up in front of a fireplace with a good book. It's all about balance. This could look like listening to a podcast or a self-improvement type of book. It could be using sage or Palo Santo or incense to energetically clear your home. If that's your thing. It could be making a new friend or setting an intention or visualizing how you want your day to go. It could be going to therapy. It could be spending time around friends that really fill you, or time to indulge mindfully in very pleasurable things. The key here is mindfully, of course, but these are the proactive things. Like, these are the things that, are going to help. Life is not about just working and getting stuff done. It's about balance. It's about enjoying as much as working. It's about doing a little bit. And it's also about taking care of your body and your mental health so that you can, be the best version of yourself. And that's where this part comes in. I think these are the things that we really think about when we talk about self-care. I would say in this category is the classic bath bombs, spa day, whatever. That is where this goes. This is generally what we think of when we think of self-care. It's that proactive step. But also on the other side, I think, is also receiving. And receiving is more like allowing your spirit to speak. These are the things that you do to create space for you to hear your own soul, the universe, yourself, your subconscious, whatever it is. It's allowing that piece of you that's unspoken to have a voice or to have a say in what you're doing. Types of self-care practices that are geared towards receiving are things like breath work, meditation, yoga, journaling, pulling cards, creating space for a lot of just space, maybe unstructured time to do nothing and guilt-free. It could look like sleeping, time in nature, even just time in silence. It could be a deep conversation with a mindful friend, or time with your religion or religious texts, whether you read the Bible or the Quran or whatever sutra, whatever your religion is, that could be that as well. It's creating space to allow something to exist that is beyond your conscious thought. And again, it's really important to balance these things. Even a bath bomb bath could be a receiving depending on how you're using it, right? So again, you kind of have to see what you need at what time and allow there to be space for that. Okay, the last category I have is creating or merging with your spiritual self and allowing your spirit to move through you. I think this is probably the most underestimated category of self-care, because I don't know that we put a lot of emphasis on creation in our culture. I don't think that we really put a lot of emphasis on consumption, because honestly, consumption makes money. Buy my product, listen to my stuff. Obviously, I want you to listen to my stuff, but what are you doing to create? What are you doing as an outlet to your soul? It wasn't until I started creating things that I realized that that is really a self-care practice. I think I've actually been getting a lot of comments lately about like, how do you do it? I have a full-time job. I have 2 kids. My husband travels. I do a lot. And I have my podcast and, my social media and my coaching practice. And all of that, though, is because I have to create. My self-care practice includes creating. It includes creating podcasts. It includes creating social media posts for somebody else. It's my imprint on the world. It's my soul speaking through me. This is the way the universe wants to express through me. And I don't think that my time on earth is simply just to indulge in pleasure and to, listen. I think that the whole point to all of that is we feel pleasure, we create space to listen so that we can create, so that we can give back. Creation is going to be the way that you give back. Creation is going to connect you to other people who are maybe suffering the same problem you were, or maybe it's just an expression of your soul. And so I think that creating is often overlooked. Like we look at that as work. Mostly we look at things as work, and it's really important to re-envision that kind of stuff. Work is only work if you don't want to do it. Creation is the most soul-filling thing that I engage in. So creation can be so many different things. It can be dancing to your favorite music or jamming out in the car. That could be a really good place to start if you don't have a creation practice. It could be like making candles. It could be doing artwork. It could be rearranging your furniture in your house. It could be playing guitar. It could be expressing yourself through yoga. It could be building PowerPoints or Excel spreadsheets or whatever your version is. Creation doesn't have to take on this specific like artsy form. It's so much broader than that. It's how does the universe want to move through you? We just don't put a lot of emphasis on it, but I think that it's one of the most underestimated things. In my last episode, I talked about stress and how a lack of autonomy will lead you into a stress state, feeling a sense of purposelessness or disconnectedness or you not contributing. Creation is how you feel like you contribute. That we have this innate need to create. We have this innate drive. We are all creators. We have this drive to give our gifts and talents back to the world, to help others, to connect with others through that. And when you're not doing that, I actually think that is a really big contributor to emotional distress in our society, whether that's depression, anxiety, inability to sleep. Those are the ways that it surfaces, and we see it everywhere. I can't tell you how many people I know that suffer depression, anxiety, inability to sleep, and I think that it's because we're not allowing spirit to move through us. That's why we're here. Okay, that's my lecture on that. Of course, wanted to leave you at the end with how do you start? How do you start your self-care practice? Where do you go? So I have a few practical steps for you. The first one is to ask yourself every day, what do I need today? Meditatively. Before you even leave your bed, just put your hand on your heart and one on your stomach and breathe and let yourself just, sit there. And then ask yourself, what do I need today? And let that answer come to you. That in itself is a form of receiving self-care practice. That in itself is just, it's so simple to do. And when I started doing this, I would have in my mind this thought of, I need to get this done, I need to do this, and I have all these goals, and I'm a type A person, and so this is how my brain works, and I've got a list of things, and what would come to me is something completely different. It would be like, drink water, or move your body slowly, or go for a walk, or enjoy the birds singing. And it's really just the simple stuff. And that answer as it comes to you, and as you receive that is where you got to follow that voice. And when you start following that voice, it just becomes a habit, it becomes a practice, and you just do it over and over and over again. And it becomes easier every time. So the second thing is discover 4 pillars of self-care. So I think I got this. I can't even remember where I got this, but it wasn't from me. It was from a book. And these are the things that you do on an almost daily or a regular basis to fill your own cup. What are the things that are going to give you the most bang for your buck? What are the things that you need, that you know you need in order to be your best self? For me, mine are a clean environment, time to be silent, some kind of self-improvement practice, whether that's listening to a book or a podcast or something like that, something that's going to propel me forward. Healthy habits, meaning sleep, eating healthy food, those are my pillars of self-care. I would also say that I can't not create either. Oh, I think that's what I was saying before, though. Like, everybody asked me, like, how do you do all this stuff? And it's like, for me, I don't see my podcast as work. I don't see social media as work. I mean, there are parts that are work, but it's like, it fills me up. It's my own self-care practice. But you get what I mean. So I guess those are 5 pillars for me. But start with 4. See what things that are really going to contribute to your emotional health. If you're not in the habit of doing things, just start one thing then for 30 days. Don't try to overwhelm yourself with all of these things. Start with one thing. It's best to get your feet wet, create a good foundation, and then add to that foundation and make it sustainable. If you're doing too many things at once, it's not going to be sustainable. And so just start a little bit at a time and see and dabble. I found my self-care practice because I dabbled in every little thing, and I found what worked, what didn't work, what I come back to, all of these things. Okay, so the third thing is practice doing one empowering thing a day. What is one thing that makes you feel empowered, that gives the power back to yourself, that focuses your control back on you and not on your external environment, on things that you can't control that are out of your control? Whether that's I'm going to control how much water I drink today and it's going to be a gallon, or whether that's I'm going to say no to going out after work because I'm going to go to the gym. Whatever that is for you, saying no to dinner with somebody, even though you've always said yes in the past because you're prioritizing yourself and you know you need a good book. Those empowering things are going to stack up, and it's like a muscle, like I said. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more it just becomes second nature. The fourth thing is visualize your day and include your self-practice in that day. So when you wake up, ask yourself, what do I need every day? Let that answer come to you, and then take just a few minutes to run through your day in your mind and include your self-care practice somewhere in that day. What does that look like for you? Is that taking a bath at the end of the day? That certainly could be it. Is that taking a bath in the morning? Is that spending 30 minutes in meditation? Is that spending 15 minutes reading a book that you really wanted to read? Is that meal prepping so that you have good food to eat? Is that saying no to going out to Chick-fil-A with your coworkers because you brought a salad? Whatever that is, like I said, the self-care practice is going to be probably the hard but worthwhile thing. And so if you're out of practice, you're going to have to exercise that muscle for a little bit until you can see that it's paying off, that's worth it. There's going to come a day when choosing the salad over the Chick-fil-A sandwich is second nature. You don't even want it because you know it's going to make you feel like shit. But until you get there, it's going to be hard work. And so visualizing sets you up for success in that realm. I think the point to your whole self-care practice is making it a priority so that you can figure out what really fills you and where you're off. That way you can look at your pillars and say, which one of these needs are not being met right now? That's going to contribute to my stress. And do your best to give those things back to yourself instead of spewing your stress, frustration, or anger onto the people who are closest to you, or misdirecting it, or turning it internal, or turning to addictions, or having a negative internal state. All of those things can be mitigated with a good self-care practice, but it takes your prioritization. Thank you guys for being here with me today. I really enjoyed doing this, and I will see you next time. If you enjoyed this episode, I would invite you to subscribe, share it with someone you know, and leave an honest rating or review. You can also connect with me through Instagram at spiritmind.body, through YouTube, or my website. Links to all of these can be found in the show notes below. This work is not easy and requires tremendous self-reflection, grit, and a willingness to be misunderstood, and for that, I honor every single one of you for showing up for your authentic self. Until next time.